My name is Sarah Reynolds. I was 30 years old when my father turned me into the punchline of his 58th birthday speech and smiled like he'd said something charming. He lifted his bourbon, looked around the room full of neighbors, golf buddies, church friends, and people who had watched me grow up, and said, "I have 2 daughters. One sells million-dollar homes, and one still runs documents and coffee around town like she's 20. The room burst open. Someone snorted. Someone clapped. A woman near the cake covered her mouth like the cruelty was adorable. Then my sister's voice floated in, bright and polished. "Remember when she said she'd be a businesswoman?" More laughter. My mother leaned against the dining table, lips curled in that tiny smirk she used when she wanted to wound me without taking responsibility for it. "Some kids just never grow up," she said. Even my teenage nephew grinned and asked if I was still living off dead people's signatures and grandma's leftovers. My uncle added, "Maybe by next year she'll get a real job." I set my glass down so carefully you'd think it was made of ice. Nobody noticed me step back. Nobody noticed my father had just mocked the one job he didn't understand. Nobody noticed that my grandmother's old lake house, the one my parents bragged about as if it were theirs, had never really been under their control. They only knew the monthly bills got paid, the taxes got filed, the insurance stayed current, and the trust never asked questions. I stood there listening to them laugh and wondered one thing. When the systems keeping their lives polished stopped moving all at once, would they still think I was the joke? Before I tell you exactly what he said next and what happened after I walked out, tell me what time it is for you right now and where you are watching from. I'm curious to see how far this story will travel. I didn't leave in tears. That's what made it worse. I left with my shoulders straight, my purse over my arm, and my keys already in my hand, while laughter still rolled behind me through the open windows. The drive back to my apartment was 23 minutes, and by minute 10, I had replayed every line enough times that the humiliation burned itself into something colder. I wasn't a failed dream. I was a mobile notary and records courier. I handled time-sensitive legal filings for law firms, hospitals, title offices, and probate attorneys all over DuPage County. I knew how signatures, escrows, deadlines, trust disbursements, and ownership records worked because I had spent years learning the boring parts of money that flashy people ignored. My family never respected that because it didn't sound glamorous at dinner. My sister, Jessica, sold marble kitchens and staged lives for rich strangers. I carried sealed envelopes, witnessed signatures, filed corrective deeds, and solved problems before they became disasters. It wasn't pretty work, but it was real, and more important than any of them knew. It was exactly the kind of work my grandmother had trusted me with before she died. 3 years earlier, when her memory started slipping, she had called me, not Jessica, not my father, to help her organize her estate files. She said I was the only one in the family who read every page before signing anything. The lake house, the investment account that funded upkeep, and the small family trust had all been moved into a structure managed by an outside fiduciary. I wasn't the owner. I wasn't some secret millionaire. But I was the designated operations contact. The person authorized to submit compliance renewals, verify occupancy certifications, update tax mailing information, approve routine maintenance disbursements, and confirm auto-pay instructions after annual review. It was unglamorous, technical, and easy to mock, which is probably why nobody asked questions as long as their light stayed on and the debit cards cleared. A week before my father's birthday, I had already emailed him twice and texted my mother once about missing paperwork tied to the trust residence, the truck loan he'd parked under an address attached to the property, and the shared household autopay account that required verification after a flagged audit. Nobody answered. That night after the party, I opened my laptop at my kitchen counter, pulled up the unread message chain, and stared at the deadline notice. Annual verification expired in 7 days. If it lapsed, automatic disbursements connected to the residence would freeze until the trustee received updated documents and reauthorized access. Mortgage drafts tied to their household routing profile could bounce. Insurance premiums could pause. Property tax escrow status could trigger review. It wasn't dramatic sabotage. It was process. I had warned them 3 times. I drafted one more email. You publicly mock the work you rely on. Since I'm clearly not part of this household in any meaningful way, I'll no longer chase anyone for missing documents. You may contact the trustee directly. Then I deleted the last sentence, rewrote it more professionally, and sent only this final reminder. Annual trust compliance packet remains incomplete. If not returned by Friday at 5 p.m., all automated residential disbursements will suspend pending review. I attached the forms. I CC'd both parents. I did not copy Jessica. Then I put my phone face down and went to sleep better than I had in months. 0. The next few days told me everything I needed to know. My father viewed the email and ignored it. My mother opened it twice, forwarded it to herself, and still sent nothing back. Jessica posted a video from a luxury condo tour with the caption, "Busy building actual business." By Thursday afternoon, the trustee's office sent the final notice. I read it in my parked car between assignments while waiting outside a rehab hospital for a discharge packet signature. No updated residency affidavit received. No verification of current authorized occupants. No reauthorization of linked payment instructions. Routine disbursements will be temporarily suspended at close of business Friday. I didn't call. I didn't beg. For years, I had mistaken enabling for love. I'd cleaned up late tax notices, fixed the homeowner portal login, corrected mailing addresses after my father ignored county mail, and once stopped an insurance lapse because my mother forgot to update a replacement card after fraud. Every time I helped, they treated it like magic. Every time I explained it, they treated me like I was speaking a less impressive language. So that Friday, I did my rounds, notarized a power of attorney in Elmhurst, dropped 3 filings at the county clerk, and bought takeout on my way home. At 5:04 p.m., the system suspended exactly as the notice said it would. Monday morning, the first text hit at 7:05. My mother. My card got declined for coffee. WTF. I was brushing my teeth when it buzzed. I looked at it, rinsed, and set the phone down. At 7:15, my sister texted in all caps. Why is my mortgage showing unpaid? The house is in foreclosure. That told me she had done what Jessica always did. Moved fast, asked no questions, and tied temporary financing to an address or account structure she barely understood because she assumed someone else would keep the machine running. At 8:05, my father called 3 times and left a voicemail that sounded like pure outrage. Call me back now. The truck payment didn't draft and they're talking repossession warning fees. What did you do? Not what happened. Not can you explain. What did you do? By 9:38, my mother's voice had changed. Gone was the anger. In its place was something wet and thin and frightened. Sarah, please pick up the house. Someone at the trust office says they can't confirm occupancy, and there's a hold on the residential account. They're saying the property isn't in our names the way your father thought. Where are you? I sat in my car outside a title office and let silence answer for me. That was the moment something shifted. Not in them, in me. All those years, I had stayed quiet because I thought speaking up required permission. But systems don't care who gets invited to the table. They care who signed, who filed, who answered, who read. My family had laughed at the daughter who handled paperwork. Now paperwork was laughing back. And the ugliest part wasn't that I felt guilty. It was that I didn't. I felt steady. I felt like someone had finally turned the lights on in a house where everybody else preferred chandeliers and shadows. I asked myself a question I should have asked years earlier. If the daughter they mocked was the only person who knew where the floorboards creaked, why had I spent so long acting like a guest in my own family? I finally answered when the trustee's office itself called me. Not because I owed my family comfort, but because I still respected process. The fiduciary manager, a precise woman named Patricia Vance, confirmed what I already knew. No one had returned the residency affidavit. No one had submitted updated insurance declarations. A side issue had emerged during review. My father had used the trust residence as supporting documentation on more than one financial application, including the truck refinance and a short-term bridge arrangement tied to one of Jessica's speculative property purchases. That was when the whole ugly structure clicked together. This wasn't just sloppiness. My father had borrowed against an image. He had used the lake house, my grandmother's house, preserved through the trust, as social proof, leverage, and family branding. The same man who mocked me in public had privately depended on a legal structure. He didn't understand, because understanding it would have required respecting the kind of work I did. By noon, he was calling nonstop. By 1, Jessica sent a voice note trying a different angle. "Sarah, this misunderstanding is spiraling. I have a closing this week, and underwriting is asking questions because something flagged on my debt profile. Just fix whatever clerical thing happened, and we'll sort out the family stuff later." The family stuff. As if humiliation were bad timing. As if dignity were an afterthought behind escrow. At 2, my mother showed up at my apartment unannounced. I watched from the peephole while she knocked, then checked the hallway, then knocked harder. "Sarah, I know you're in there." I almost opened it. Years of conditioning rose in me automatically, but then I remembered the room at the party, the easy cruelty, the way my father had made me sound like a household embarrassment instead of a human being. I stayed still. Eventually, she left an envelope under the door. Inside was the unsigned affidavit packet I had sent 5 days earlier, now wrinkled and half completed, along with a note in her hurried handwriting. "We didn't realize it was this serious." I laughed out loud in my empty apartment. That was the whole problem. They never realized anything was serious when it came from me. That evening, my father finally cornered me where he knew I'd be. Outside the county records building just after 4, when I was walking a correction deed to my car. He stepped out from beside his truck like we were in some movie about fathers reclaiming authority. "Enough of this," he said. "You've made your point." I looked at him and waited. He didn't ask if I was okay. He didn't apologize. He didn't even try to deny the birthday speech. He talked like a man addressing a disobedient employee. "You're going to call whoever handles this and undo it." "It's not undone with a phone call," I said. "It's compliance review. Don't get smart with me. You called me a joke in front of 40 people." His jaw tightened. "So now you're punishing your own family?" "No," I said. "I stopped protecting people who punish me." For 1 second, I thought something honest might appear on his face. Shame maybe. Instead, he scoffed. "You run errands and stamp forms. Don't act like you built anything." And there it was, clean final. He really believed that because he didn't understand my work, it had no value, right up until it interrupted his comfort. I tucked the deed packet into my trunk, looked him straight in the eye, and said, "Then you should have no problem fixing it without me." He called after me as I drove away, but I didn't look back. That night, I received the official suspension summary. Mortgage link draft rejected, truck account delinquency notice generated, occupancy review pending, access to discretionary household maintenance disbursements paused. Not ownership transfer, not some cartoon revenge fantasy, just consequences arriving in order. It was more satisfying than anger because it was real. By Tuesday, the family group chat had turned into a live feed of panic. My mother posted screenshots from the bank app. Jessica sent voice memos from her car between showings, her polished voice cracking at the edges. My father alternated between commands and accusations. "Call me now. This is insane. You've gone too far." I muted them all and went to work. There was something almost holy about continuing my day while their emergency bloomed around them. I notarized an eldercare directive for a widow who thanked me like I'd handed her oxygen. I delivered settlement documents to a title office where 3 people greeted me by name, and one of them said, "Sarah saves us every time." I filed lien releases, corrected a witness block, and watched 2 different attorneys ask for me specifically because I caught details others missed. All day, I moved through a world where competence mattered more than image, and it made my family's cruelty feel even smaller. That evening, they showed up together at my apartment. My mother first, then Jessica in heels too sharp for the cracked sidewalk, then my father last, already angry before I opened the door. I only let them in because I was tired of being hunted in parking lots and hallways. My apartment embarrassed Jessica on sight. She looked around at the used bookshelf, the folding desk, the clean but mismatched kitchen chairs, and I could see the judgment flicker before the desperation covered it. My mother clasped her purse with both hands like she was keeping herself from shaking. My father didn't sit. "Fix it," he said. "No hello, no apology." Jessica tried the softer approach. "Sarah, we all said stupid things at the party. It got out of hand, but this could damage my business." I stared at her. "That's your opening line?" She exhaled. "I'm trying to be practical." Practical would have been not humiliating the person who keeps the paperwork in order. My mother finally stepped in. "Honey, we didn't know everything was connected." "That's because none of you listen when I speak." My father pointed at me. "Don't twist this. You're being vindictive." "No," I said, and my own calm surprised me. Vindictive would be me lying, forging, interfering, or inventing problems. I did none of that. I sent required documents. You ignored them. Then the system suspended. Jessica crossed her arms. "You could have called me." I almost laughed. "The same Jessica who mocked me in front of your clients' wives? The same Jessica who calls my work errands?" Her face hardened. "You always make yourself the victim." There it was again, my role in the family neat and familiar. Swallow the insult, solve the problem, accept no credit, and apologize for the inconvenience of having feelings. I stepped closer, not loudly, not dramatically, just enough that none of them could pretend I was fading into the wallpaper again. "Do you want to know what changed?" I asked. "Nothing in the trust, nothing in the bank, nothing in the law. The only thing that changed is that I stopped cushioning your disrespect." My father laughed then, a short, contemptuous sound. "You think you're teaching us a lesson?" "No," I said. "I think reality is." He shook his head and muttered, "Unbelievable." Then, as if he couldn't help himself, he said the sentence that finished whatever mercy I had left. "After everything we've done for you, you live in this place and act powerful because of paperwork." I opened the front door. "Get out." My mother gasped my name. Jessica stared. My father squared his shoulders like he might argue, but something in my face must have told him the old version of me was gone. On their way out, my mother turned back and whispered, "If we lose that house..." I cut her off. "Then maybe you'll finally learn the difference between having something and being entitled to it." The door closed. For the first time in my life, silence didn't feel lonely. It felt earned. 10 minutes later, my father texted, "You think you're somebody now?" I read it, locked my phone, and let him sit with the question. The next week was the part nobody in my family had prepared for. The stretch where a crisis stops feeling like a dramatic misunderstanding and starts becoming administrative reality. Late fees became notices. Notices became deadlines. Underwriting flags became calls Jessica couldn't charm away. The truck lender sent a pre-repossession warning after the failed draft wasn't cured in time. The property insurer requested updated occupancy verification before reinstating automatic monthly withdrawal. The trustee's office scheduled a formal review meeting and informed them that residential use of the lake house would remain restricted until documentation and account separation were corrected. My parents had spent years living inside a story where appearance created authority. Now they were meeting institutions that wanted signatures, not swagger. I heard pieces of it from everywhere. A mutual family friend told me my father had been seen at the diner snapping at his phone. One title clerk mentioned Jessica looked distracted at a closing and nearly missed a commission instruction. My cousin texted to ask why Aunt Linda was suddenly calling relatives just to reconnect. The answer was simple. Because shame makes people reach for the audience they once performed in front of. My mother eventually called me from a number I didn't recognize, and I answered by accident while loading notarized meds into my trunk. Her voice sounded older. "Your father sold his boat," she said without greeting. I didn't respond. Jessica borrowed against her brokerage bonus, and it still didn't clear everything. I leaned against the car door and let the silence stretch until she understood I wasn't rescuing the conversation. Finally, she said, "I'm not asking you to make it disappear. I'm asking what we actually have to do." That was the first honest sentence anyone in my family had spoken to me in weeks. So I told her. Separate household accounts from trust-related addresses. Submit current occupancy certifications. Correct financial applications that implied ownership where there was only permitted use. Provide insurance documentation. Attend the trustee review without theatrics. Stop treating inherited structure like personal reputation. She listened. She even wrote things down. Then she said quietly, "Your father used the house to make people think we were doing better than we were." "I know," I said. "I saw the flagged applications." A long pause. "Then did Grandma know he'd become like this?" That question cracked something in me, because my grandmother had known exactly what he was. Not evil, just vain, proud, and addicted to being seen as solid. She used to say, "Your father doesn't lie about numbers. He lies about what numbers mean." That was why she trusted me with the administrative side. I remembered her kitchen table, the smell of tea, the way she'd tap a document and say, "People who read the fine print get mocked until the fine print matters." Meanwhile, consequences kept moving. Jessica lost a high-end listing after a client heard there was family financial noise around her. My father's truck wasn't repossessed yet, but a recovery agent did show up once, which was humiliating enough in a neighborhood built on curated respectability. My mother quietly sold 2 pieces of jewelry. For the first time, the mockery had a cost they could count. And still, I didn't celebrate. That surprised me. I had imagined revenge would feel loud. It didn't. It felt like standing at the edge of a frozen lake and realizing the cracking sound was not danger coming for you. It was the ice finally revealing where it had always been weak. The trustee meeting was set for Thursday. The night before, Jessica came alone. No heels this time, no polished voice. She sat on the front step of my building because I wouldn't invite her in immediately. And when I joined her, she looked more like my sister than she had in years. "I was awful to you," she said, staring at the parking lot. "Not just at the party. For years." I said nothing. "I liked being the successful one," she admitted. "It made me feel safe. And if you were the family mess, then nobody looked too closely at the rest of us." That was the closest thing to truth I'd ever heard from her. "You laugh too," I said. She nodded. "Sometimes." I waited. "I know. Are you going to help tomorrow?" I thought about the question. Help did not have to mean a rescue. Compassion did not require amnesia. "I'll attend," I said. "I'll explain the process. I won't lie for anyone." She nodded once. "That's fair." It was more than fair. It was the first boundary I had ever drawn without apologizing for the inconvenience. The trustee meeting took place in a low beige conference room that smelled like burnt coffee and copier heat. And for once, my family entered a room they could not dominate with tone, posture, or family mythology. Patricia Vance sat at one end with a compliance attorney and a stack of folders. My father looked smaller than I had ever seen him, though pride still clung to him like a bad cologne. My mother kept both hands wrapped around a legal pad. Jessica had no makeup on. I sat slightly apart from them, not as their fixer, but as the recorded operational contact who could confirm timelines. Patricia did not raise her voice. She did not need to. She walked item by item through the suspension. Ignored notices, unreturned affidavit, unsupported address usage, misleading financial reliance on a trust-managed residence, and repeated failure to distinguish between permitted occupancy and ownership rights. Every sentence stripped away another layer of the illusion my family had wrapped around itself. When she finished, she turned to me. "Ms. Reynolds, for the record, did you issue reminder communications prior to suspension?" "Yes," I said. "Multiple written reminders with attached forms and deadlines." "Did you suspend any account personally?" "No. The system suspended automatically after non-compliance." My father shifted in his chair. He wanted to interrupt, but facts are harder to fight when you use to mock the person holding them. The attorney laid out the resolution path. They would not lose the house that day, but they would lose unrestricted use unless everything was corrected. Certain payments would need manual restructuring. My father would need to unwind representations tied to the property. Jessica's financing issue would have to be disclosed and cleaned up separately. There were fees. There were delays. There was embarrassment. There was no magical reversal. Then Patricia said something I will remember for the rest of my life. This situation escalated because the one person in the family who understood the administrative obligations was not treated as someone worth hearing. Nobody looked at me. That was fine. They had spent years looking past me. Finally, the room was forcing them to look at what that cost. After the meeting, my father asked if we could speak privately. We stood in the parking lot under a gray sky with damp wind moving through the bare trees. He didn't begin well. Men like him rarely do. He started with a sigh, then half a justification, then a sentence about pressure, then one about trying to keep the family image together. I let him run out of excuses. When he finally stopped, I said, "Do you know what hurt most? Not the joke. Not even the room laughing. It was that you really believed I was less valuable than the things I quietly kept from falling apart." He looked at the pavement. "I was proud of Jessica in the way people can see," he said. "And I treated you like what you did only mattered when something went wrong." "Yes," I said. "Exactly." His eyes were wet when he looked up, and that shook me more than anger would have. I was wrong. No grand speech, no perfect redemption. Just 4 words dragged through gravel. My mother apologized too, later that evening in my apartment, where she finally looked around without contempt and said she had confused dependence with authority for years. Jessica's apology came in pieces over time, which somehow made it more believable. She started correcting people when they dismissed my work. She stopped making jokes. She even asked me once to explain a title issue instead of pretending she already understood it. As for me, I did help, but on my terms. I attended follow-up calls, clarified records, organized the remediation checklist, and made sure the trust was protected without letting my family slide back into old habits. My father sold the truck himself before it could be taken. My mother downsized her spending and took over her own bill calendar for the first time in decades. Jessica lost the listing, but not her career. They paid in money, stress, and public pride. More than that, they paid in the one currency people like them hate most: being forced to admit that the person they mocked had been the most competent person in the room. That was the part that changed them. And here's the truth I'd leave with anyone listening. I didn't get revenge by destroying my family. I got it by stepping back and letting reality expose what my silence had protected. People love to measure worth by titles they can brag about in a crowded room. But life is held together by quieter skills. Reading carefully, showing up consistently, understanding systems, honoring responsibility, and respecting people whose work you don't find glamorous. Never mock the person who keeps the foundation level just because you prefer the view from the balcony. One day, the balcony shakes, and suddenly the person you called a joke is the only one who knows why the house is still standing. So tell me this. Have you ever watched someone get dismissed because their work didn't look impressive, only to realize too late they were the one holding everything together? From my perspective, this story is powerful because it shows how easy it is for families to underestimate the quietest person in the room. Sarah was mocked not because she lacked value, but because her strengths were invisible to people who only respected status and appearances. What makes this story memorable is that her response was not reckless anger, but quiet self-respect and truth finally catching up with everyone. It reminds us that dignity, responsibility, And useful knowledge often matter far more than public praise. Have you ever been underestimated by people who only realized your value when you stepped back?